For decades, dairy breeders have placed their bets on towering Holsteins. But in episode 178, that genetic gamble gets a red alert. This is the Bullvine podcast, where tradition collides with data-driven reality. Today, hosts Bella and Douglas dissect the billion-dollar showdown shaking barns and show rings worldwide. Are towering Holsteins stealing your profits? Are judges trading ribbons for herd health? Tune in for shocking truths, sire strategies, and the industry-shaking revelations rewriting Holstein history. Buckle up, this one's a barn burner.
Welcome, dairy enthusiasts, to another episode of the Bullvine podcast. I'm Bella, joined by my co-host, the ever-insightful Douglas. Today, we're tackling a hot topic that's been causing quite a stir in show rings and milking parlors alike.
That's right, Bella. We're diving deep into the controversial world of Holstein stature. Is bigger really better, or are we breeding ourselves into a corner?
Intriguing. So, what can our listeners expect from today's show, Douglas?
We'll be exposing some hard truths about tall cows, examining the real costs of chasing height, and introducing some bulls that are rewriting the breeding playbook. Plus, we'll share some practical tips for breeders looking to balance show ring appeal with profitability.
Sounds like we've got a lot to cover. Let's jump right in, shall we?
Well, Bella, unlike some of these towering Holsteins, we won't need a stepladder to get started.
Good one, Douglas. So let's begin with the big picture. What's the deal with tall cows in the show ring?
It's a trend that's been building for years, Bella. The show ring has become obsessed with height, spawning a generation of Holstein titans. We're talking cows topping 62 inches at the hip. Now, they might dazzle under the spotlights, but there's a brutal truth hiding behind all that glitz.
Oh, do tell.
According to data from the Canadian Dairy Network in 2023, every extra inch of height is costing farmers $1.20 per day in feed. But it gets worse. These skyscrapers on hooves are living 1.7 fewer lactations than their more moderate counterparts.
Wow, that's a significant difference. But surely there must be some benefits to having taller cows, right? Otherwise, why would breeders pursue this trait?
You'd think so, wouldn't you? But here's the kicker. These aren't just oversized cows. They're what I like to call genomic Ponzi schemes. They trade fleeting show ring applause for long-term problems like udder health issues and difficult calvings.
That's quite a claim, Douglas. Can you break it down for our listeners?
Certainly. Let's start with feed efficiency. Cornell University studies have shown that these 62-inch genetic skyscrapers inhale 15% more feed per pound than their more modest-sized herd mates.
Can you put that into perspective for us?
Sure thing. Let's take a 1,600-pound cow as an example. She's gobbling up an extra 6 pounds of feed every single day. That's $1.20 out of your pocket, day in and day out. Over a standard 305-day lactation? That's $438 gone, about the cost of replacing a busted milking claw.
When you put it that way, it does sound like a significant expense. But what about their milk production? Doesn't that offset the cost?
You'd hope so, Bella, but the numbers tell a different story. Let's look at some data from the Canadian Dairy Network.
I'm all ears.
For every 1.5-point increase in stature TA or STA, we see a 0.45-point decrease in daughter pregnancy rate. In plain English, taller cows are having a harder time getting pregnant and staying pregnant.
That sounds like a recipe for reproductive headaches.
Exactly, and it gets worse. Cows over 61 inches tall are demanding 26% more calving interventions. Nothing says profitable herd quite like playing bovine midwife at 3 a.m., right?
Ouch. That's not just a financial cost, but a quality of life issue for farmers, too.
But wait, there's more. When we compare moderate cows to tall cows, we're looking at an average of 3.2 lactations versus 2.5. That difference translates to over $2,400 in lost milk revenue per cow.
Those are some sobering statistics, Douglas. It seems like the costs really add up.
They do indeed. And here's a thought that should keep breeders up at night. Every lactation lost to your show queen's dainty longevity equals 12 fresh heifers you could have raised instead.
It's It's clear there's a lot more to consider than just how impressive a cow looks in the ring. But Douglas, I'm curious, are there any benefits at all to breeding for height?
Well, Bella, I suppose if you're looking to start a bovine basketball team, you'd be all set. But in terms of practical farming, the evidence is pretty damning.
Yet, point taken. So if height isn't the answer, what should breeders be focusing on?
Now we're asking the right questions. It's time to talk about what I call the genetic gladiators, bulls that are rewriting the breeding rulebooks.
Genetic gladiators. That sounds exciting. Who are these bulls?
Let me introduce you to a few key players. First up, we have DG Bechamel. This bull is what I like to call the connoisseur's choice.
What makes him so special?
Bechamel has a TPI of 2750, an STA of 1.82, and a PTA type of plus 3.10. But here's the kicker. His net merit, or M, is plus 820. That means his daughters are essentially turning show ribbons into cold, hard cash.
Those are some impressive numbers. What about his udder scores?
Glad you asked. Bechamel's got an udder composite of plus 2.30. His daughter's udders are so tight you could bounce a quarter off them.
Now that's a visual. Who else is on this list of genetic superstars?
Next up is Genosaurus Eagle Eye. This bull isn't just building udders, he's engineering cathedrals. We're talking about a plus 2.45 udder composite.
That sounds impressive, but what does it mean in practical terms?
Great question. According to CDN data, every 1-point increase in udder composite translates to an 18% lower risk of mastitis. But Eagle Eye is not just about udders. He's got a fertility index of plus 2.4, which is like giving your cows heirloom quality ovaries.
These bulls sound like they're really changing the game. Are there more?
Absolutely. Let's talk about Genosaurus Big Kahuna. This bull is what I call a compact cash tsunami.
Compact cash tsunami? That's quite a title.
It's well earned, Bella. Big Kahuna has an STA of just 1.64, shorter than your morning latte. But don't let that fool you. His PTA type is plus 3.32, and he's sporting an N-Ember of plus 805.
So he's proof that good things come in small packages.
Exactly. Big Kahuna shows that dynamite really does come in small packages. And here's a bonus. His calves won't need chiropractors to recover from calving.
It's fascinating to see how these bulls are balancing different traits. Is there one more you'd like to highlight?
Indeed there is. Let me introduce you to Carter's Corner Charmer. This bull is what I call a stealth wealth prodigy.
Stealth wealth prodigy? Now that sounds interesting.
Charmer has an STA of just 1.49, making him practically undercover in the show ring. But here's where it gets exciting. He's got a PTA type of plus 3.04 and an NMLers of plus $795. Top it off with a fertility index of 2.3, and you've got a bull that's basically bovine Tinder gold.
Douglas, your analogies are priceless. But jokes aside, these bulls seem to offer a real alternative to the bigger is better mindset. How can breeders start incorporating these genetics into their herds?
That's the million-dollar question, Bella. It all starts with a shift in mindset. Breeders need to stop thinking about creating Instagram-worthy cows and start focusing on breeding biological ATMs.
Biological ATMs? Can you elaborate on that?
Certainly. It's all about prioritizing traits that translate directly to profitability. Let's start with udders, for example.
I'm listening.
At the 2024 World Dairy Expo, 67% of winning cows scored excellent in udder depth, compared to only 38% for stature. That's a clear signal that judges are starting to prioritize functional traits over pure size.
That's an interesting shift. What's driving this change?
It's all about the bottom line, Bella. According to the Canadian Dairy Network, every 1-point increase in udder composite score reduces mastitis risk by 14%. That's not just good for the cow, it's good for the farmer's wallet, too.
So by focusing on udder quality, breeders can improve both show ring success and farm profitability.
Exactly. It's like choosing to invest in a Roth IRA instead of buying lottery tickets. Maybe less exciting in the short term, but much more profitable in the long run.
What other traits should breeders be focusing on?
Fertility is another big one. Remember Eagle Eye, the bull we mentioned earlier?
The one with the heirloom quality ovaries?
That's the one. His fertility index of plus 2.4 isn't just a number. It translates to real-world benefits. His daughters are averaging 12 fewer days between calvings compared to the breed average.
And what does that mean in dollar terms?
Great question. According to USDA data from 2024, that 12-day improvement equates to $480 in additional lifetime revenue per cow. Multiply that across a 100-cow herd, and you're looking at $48,000 in extra milk checks over those cows' lifetimes.
No thanks. Those are some significant numbers. It really puts into perspective how these genetic choices can impact a farm's bottom line.
Absolutely. And here's something else to consider. Fertility-focused herds are reporting 36% fewer veterinary emergencies, according to 2024 data from CDN Herd Analytics.
It seems like there's a real snowball effect here. Better fertility leads to fewer health issues, which in turn leads to better longevity and profitability.
You've hit the nail on the head, Bella. It's all interconnected, and that's why it's so crucial for breeders to take a holistic approach to their breeding programs.
Speaking of breeding programs, I know there's been a lot of debate about how show ring standards impact breeding decisions. What's the latest on that front?
Well, Bella, that's where things get really interesting. There's been a significant shift in how judges are evaluating cows, especially when it comes to stature.
Oh, tell me more.
Let's look at the 2024 World Dairy Expo results. 58% of the champion cows had a stature TA or STA of 1.85 or lower. That's a far cry from the towering giants we used to see dominating the show rings.
That's quite a change. What's driving this shift?
It's a combination of factors. Judges are becoming more aware of the long-term implications of breeding for extreme height. Plus, the data on profitability and longevity for moderate-sized cows is becoming impossible to ignore.
So it's not just about looks anymore.
Exactly. Show ring analytics now reveal that udders contribute 31% to overall type scores, compared to just 19% for stature. It's a clear signal that functional traits are taking precedence over pure size.
It sounds like the industry is really evolving, but I imagine there are still some holdouts who prefer the taller cows.
Oh, certainly. There are always those who think bigger is better. But I like to ask them, when was the last time you saw a judge handing out ribbons for most likely to decapitate herself on a doorframe?
Douglas, your wit never fails to entertain. But jokes aside, what advice do you have for breeders who are looking to adapt to these changing standards?
It all comes down to what I call the genetic commandments. These are the rules that separate the prophets from the genetic gamblers.
Genetic commandments? That sounds important. Can you break them down for our listeners?
Absolutely. Let's start with bull selection. When you're choosing bulls, you need to think NASDAQ, not yard sale.
What do you mean by that?
I'm talking about focusing on key economic indicators. Look for bulls with a net merit, or NM dollars, of 750 or higher and a fertility index of at least plus 2.0. These aren't just bulls, they're biological IPOs with USDA stamped ROI.
Those are some specific targets. How do they translate to real-world benefits?
Well, an NM dollars of 750 or higher means that bulls' daughters will be generating an extra $2.10 per day before they're even weaned. Pair that with a high fertility index, and you've got cows that are cycling faster than Bitcoin prices.
Another great analogy, Douglas. What's the next commandment?
The second commandment is all about setting a height ceiling for your herd. I recommend capping female STA at 2.0, no negotiations.
And why is that specific number so important?
Great question. According to industry data, every STA point over 2.0 siphons $147 per year per cow into the feedlot abyss. Let one heifer hit an STA of 2.5, and you're looking at $20,000 lost across her shortened career.
Those numbers really put things into perspective. What's the final commandment? The last one is all about udders. We're aiming for an udder composite of plus 2.0 PTAs or higher. Any final advice for our listeners?
Remember, stop the genetic arson. Herds breeding for height lose $311 per cow annually versus balanced program. Bottom line, Breed cows that fund your legacy, not your vet's Porsche.
If today's episode lit a fire under your breeding program, do the dairy world a favor. Hit share and tag a fellow farmer who needs these insights. Drop us a review. Your 5 stars keep the honest dairy dialogue alive. Follow at the Bullvine on Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok for more uncut ag truths. Until next time, breed boldly, question harder, and remember, every udder tells a story. This has been the Bullvine Podcast. Episodes archive at www.thebullvine.com.